Hey you are nerds, Kate here, and today's words are all about the new Beauty and the Beast movie. So earlier this week I went with one of my friends from work to go see the new Beauty and the Beast, and it was fantastic. We had a really great time, we both really enjoyed the movie. And I thought I'd do a more comprehensive review since this is a movie based on a fairy tale and that's kind of my thing. Big ol' spoiler warning for this whole movie. I'm assuming we all know the basic story, but I am going to talk about some details that are specific to this movie, so if you haven't seen it and would like to be surprised, maybe watch this later. I'm going to split this review into 3 sections: what I liked about the movie, what I didn't like about the movie, and things I wish had happened in the movie. So we're going to start out positive. Things I liked about this movie. I was really worried when I saw the first couple of trailers that it was just going to be kind of a shot-for-shot recreation of the animated version that Disney put out. And don't get me wrong, I love the animated version. It was absolutely fantastic. It won all sorts of awards. It was great. But if they were going to remake a movie, I didn't want to just see the same thing just with real people instead of drawn characters. And it really was its own movie for the most part. There were still times when I was saying dialogue along with the movie in my head just because I knew it from the original, but it was still different, which I really liked. Speaking of things they added, the new songs were spectacular! I love the music from Beauty and the Beast, both the original animated version and the stage version on Broadway. And they used a lot of those songs, but they also added some new songs that were just fantastic. And speaking of the music, I was incredibly impressed with Emma Watson, Dan Stevens, and Luke Evans. I didn't know if any of them could sing before this, and I was really impressed, especially by Luke Evans. He has a fantastic voice. There were a couple times when you could sort of hear some auto-tuning going on, but it was never overwhelmingly so, in my opinion, and didn't really distract from the movie too much. I really appreciated how they showed Gaston's villainy. In the animated version, he wasn't necessarily bad until about 2/3 of the way through. I liked how in this one we see more that he has anger issues and he lets his temper get the better of him, and he is prone to violence and he's trying to keep himself under control, but we see that control break a few times, and so that really, for me, added a lot to his character, both depth-wise, but also it made him more of an ominous character throughout rather than just waiting until the end. I think LeFou had a really interesting character arc in that he learned to distance himself from Gaston and not blindly follow everything he said. And I also think it really proves the point of how bad Gaston really is when his closest friend and staunchest supporter is starting to doubt him. I loved how they handled the father finding the castle, in that he was there and he was welcomed, and it wasn't until he tried to steal the rose that he was imprisoned. That's actually a lot closer to the original fairy tale, but I'll get to that later. I really liked how the castle and all of its inhabitants were affected by the curse. Not only were the people turned to inanimate objects, but as time went on, the curse was closer to completion or not being able to be broken, the castle started falling apart and the servants became more and more like objects and less like humans. It really gave a sense of urgency to the movie, which I really liked. I liked how they handled the curse, kind of. Let me explain. In the animated version, for those of you who are big Disney nerds like I am, you realize that the prince is given until his 21st birthday to break the curse. And in the song Be Our Guest, Lumiere says, 10 years we've been waiting, which means that the prince was cursed when he was 10 or 11 years old, which has always kind of bugged me, that a kid who, you know, we teach kids not to trust strangers, a kid turned away an old lady and basically got his life ruined because of it, and so that has always bothered me, and so they sort of fixed it. In this one, he was an adult when he was cursed by the Enchantress, and he and the inhabitants of the castle are not aging as the curse goes on. The Enchantress also cursed them to be forgotten by the people nearby, like the village, and I'm assuming by like the rest of France, who would probably notice if nobility went missing, which I thought was a good way to try and close one plot hole, but it just opened up new ones for me. Which leads me to the things I didn't like about this movie. I'm still not sold on this curse. The Enchantress curses them to be forgotten and apparently closes off this castle to the world, but she expects the Beast to fall in love with someone and have someone fall in love with him. How is he supposed to do that if no one knows they're there? I'm assuming that Belle's father was like the first person to find the castle since it had been cursed, so it seems kind of counterintuitive. I guess you could argue that when the tree fell, when the father was traveling and then he found the path and then the next day the tree was up, that was the enchantress kind of interfering and luring Belle there, but that still leaves a lot to chance. Also, the fact that the castle appears to be in some sort of perpetual state of winter, which is interesting, and is kind of a throwback to the original fairy tale, but it made it very hard to understand the passing of time in this movie. Personally, for me, it felt like from the time Belle arrived at the castle to when she goes home to save her father from being committed to a mental institution is maybe 4 or 5 days. And that really doesn't seem like long enough to fall in love with someone, especially considering that the first few days they knew each other, they did not get along at all. A couple of the things I didn't like about this movie, I didn't like how they tried to make Gaston look stupid. Obviously, he is not as well read as Belle, and that's kind of one of the reasons she doesn't like him, is he's not intelligent and doesn't really care about building his intelligence at all. But if he's going to use words like expectorating or specimen in a song, I don't believe he's stupid. And I think one of my biggest pet peeves from this movie is that at one point during the opening song Belle, Gaston and LeFou are talking about how Gaston wants to marry Belle, and he says something about how there's just something about her, and he's like trails off not really knowing how to finish it, and LeFou says, "Je ne sais quoi?" And Gaston says, "I don't know what that means." And it's supposed to be, you know, slap your knee, haha, funny, because that literally is French for I don't know what. But this movie is set in France. And they make, like, in this version, they make a pretty big deal about this is French, this is France, they go to Paris, they are living in France. So in my mind, they're speaking French, I'm just hearing English. So the fact that he doesn't know that phrase is just completely unbelievable to me. Anyone who has had basic French could tell you what that means. Even people who don't know French know what that means. And so the fact that a Frenchman wouldn't know that phrase is just completely stupid and drives me crazy. Another problem that I have with this movie and the animated one as well is the fact that the servants are cursed with the Beast. And this movie kind of gives a half-hearted explanation as to why, in that the servants were there when the prince was growing up and weren't able to save him from his cruel father and teach him to be kind regardless. But I don't buy it. What about the servants who started working at the castle after the prince was already grown up? Or what about Chip? He wasn't even born then. The maestro or the singer, were they there? Were they actual servants of the castle, or were they just hired performers for the day? In this version especially, with such dire consequences, it's not that we're going to stay this way forever, it's that we're going to turn into actual objects. That just seems ridiculous. I don't know. My friend and I had a really great debate about this the other day, because she accepts the explanation given in this movie, and I just can't for some reason. And we didn't really come to an agreement, we just have different opinions, and that's fine. That's what people do. So those are my opinions on things that actually happened in the movie, but there are also some things that I wish had happened that didn't, and so it's kind of my wish list for the movie. First of all, I wish Audra McDonald had sung more. I mean, she is just fantastic. Although, honestly, I could probably sit through like a concert of her just singing for 2 hours straight and still want more. I'm convinced you can never have Audra McDonald sing enough. But my biggest wish for this movie, when I first heard that Disney was remaking Beauty and the Beast, I got really excited, because Disney has been remaking a lot of its movies lately, starting with Maleficent a couple years ago, and then Cinderella, and they did Jungle Book last year or the year before, and I didn't get around to seeing that. But with Cinderella and Maleficent, Disney really kind of remade the story. And I was really hoping for Beauty and the Beast that they would do something similar. But I was really hoping that they would go back to the original fairy tale on this. When Disney makes fairy tales, for the most part, they almost always have to change them from the original source material, just because the originals are so dark and violent and, like, terrifying in a lot of cases. And Beauty and the Beast is, like, the one that isn't. the one that they didn't need to change, but they did. And part of me just really wanted to see that original fairy tale come to life as, you know, it was written and not be changed so drastically. In the original fairy tale, there's no Gaston. There's no angry mob of villagers, ever. There's just Belle, who is living with her family, and there's the Beast, who was cursed for pretty much no reason. He was not a bad person. He didn't have to learn a lesson. In some versions, it's just a bad fairy decided to curse him. In other reasons, it's because he refused to marry the bad fairy. In the original, the Beast is never mean, he's never rude, he's always super polite to Belle. From the very beginning, Belle and the Beast are friends. He asks her to marry him every night and she says no, but they are still friends. They do not get angry and yell at each other. She doesn't try to escape. Like, they have an amicable relationship. And it's just so interesting to me because almost every version of Beauty and the Beast that I've seen has kind of taken the Disney route. He has to learn to be nice. She has to learn to look past a gruff exterior. So that's kind of what I had been hoping for with this movie. As I started to see the trailers and hear about it, I realized that's not what I was gonna get, but I was still very happy with the movie. Not disappointed at all. I hope you don't take that away from this review. So I'm gonna stop talking now because I've been talking for like 30 minutes now and my throat is starting to hurt. So if you're interested in more of my words, you can check out links below to my blog, Facebook page, and Twitter account. I would love to hear from you, so comment below, let me know if you've seen the movie and what you thought of it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and you will see me next time, word nerds.